welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 434, and today's date is August 6, 2014, and the title of this episode is Central Bankers, U.S. Government, and NATO are setting the stage for war. Now, we can see, as of today, the United States is really playing up that military drill that Russia is performing, and they're performing this drill about 400 miles or so away from the Ukrainian border. Yes, they come up to the Ukrainian border, then they go back to the initial area. Now, of course, the United States, NATO, Ukraine, they are pushing this propaganda very, very hard to convince everyone that Russia is getting ready to do something. Now, we've heard this many, many times before. We've seen the propaganda out there where they've told us Russia is invading Crimea. It looks like we're going into war. Russia's coming over the Ukrainian border. It looks like we're going to war. It looks like that Russia's coming into the southeastern section and they'll be invading. They're already firing on Ukraine. And all of this turned out to be false. There have been international inspectors, the OSCE out there. They're right now on the border making sure that no Ukrainian tanks or planes or firing goes on against the Russian people. All of this is being created to continually provoke Russia. You have to remember, the central bankers, U.S. government, they need this war started any way they can. They need to make sure they have certain nations painted as the evil nations that we will be going to war with. That would be Russia, North Korea, China, most likely Syria, Iran, and other nations. And we can see right now they are continually pushing the agenda. They will not stop. It has nothing to do with proof. It has nothing to do with anything. They just want this information out on the corporate media. They want people to start believing that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, they're all our enemy. It will make it a lot easier when war starts, where everyone knows who the enemy is. And this is what they're doing at this point. And this is why you see all this propaganda continually going on and on. And the reason why they need to ramp this up right now is because the Middle East is falling apart. Libya is pretty much gone. The tribes have taken over the country of Libya. Yemen, the tribes are rising up and they are maneuvering to remove the puppet regime there. The same thing's happening in Lebanon. This is why we're seeing military assets being rushed into the government of Lebanon. We have other nations also rushing armament into Lebanon because they realize they are completely losing control. Then, of course, they have the Islamic State, which is controlled by the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations and other private Western Central Bank countries. And this Islamic State is supposed to be the pretext of saying, oh, look, this terrorist organization, which they are saying is more like an armed force now, is spreading into all of these countries to confuse everyone, to create chaos, so you don't realize it's actually the people of these countries. And they're trying to push this further and further to make it seem like, yes, sooner or later we will need, and when I say we, it's the United States central bankers, need to go in there, put boots on the ground. We will have to have an Air Force attack or something like this, and you're going to see something occur, some type of an event that will allow the United States government to say, listen, we need to go to war. They attacked us. Listen, we need to go to war because they invaded another country. Listen, we need to go to war because of some reason. And of course, they continually try all these false flags. We see MH17 is a false flag, and they're going to continue and escalate this, and we're going to see more and more events. Why do you think all of these warnings have come out that the Islamic State is going to bomb embassies? And of course, a couple months before that, the Department of Justice, Department of Defense sent out bombs to all different areas of the world, to different embassies, because they're preparing for this event. They do this in advance. They have everything set up and ready. It's almost like the illegals coming into this country. Back in January, they had everything prepared. DHS was prepared. FEMA was prepared. They started advertising down in the Central American countries. They put out ads to hire escorts to bring these illegals over the border. This was all planned back in January, and it's happening right now in July going into August. The same thing with everything that they're doing has been planned already months in advance, and this is how we know something is about to happen. This whole Ebola breakout, this whole illegal thing going on here, the Islamic State, all of this prepared months in advance, and now when you look back in time, what do you see? You see evidence of them planning for this, and there's more evidence coming down the line that we'll discuss a little bit later in this report. But let's get into the economic collapse news, and what we're seeing is Abe economics is really not working. We're seeing many Japanese households moving on to welfare, and it's on the rise. The number of households on welfare in Japan hit a record high of 1.6 million in May right now. When we look across Europe, what are we seeing? Well, I've been saying this for quite a while, that the Eurozone, France, Italy, Cyprus, Portugal, Spain, Greece, Germany, UK, the entire system there is crumbling and falling apart. And of course, France was out there and many other nations were out there saying, oh, we see growth, everything looks great, we're seeing a recovery, 2 thumbs up. But what we're seeing right now, France is being decimated, real estate is imploding on itself. People are looking at the government saying, you know what, you continually lie to us, we don't see a recovery. We see unemployment rising and things are not getting better here. Same thing's happening in Italy. Italy, unexpectedly, reported a sequential contraction of minus 0.2% down from a minus 0.1% drop in Q1, and officially the start of yet another recession. And we can see right now it is not getting better. Italy's youth unemployment is over 40%. It just hit a record high. Regular unemployment is continually going up. Germany factory orders, their data for June, which crashed to a negative 3.2% on expectations of a bounce from a negative 1.6% to a 0.9%. So they are not doing well. This entire European recovery is non-existent. It is getting worse. And why do you think NATO is out there, Europe is out there, and especially the United States is out there pushing and provoking war at this time? They need this to cover up this entire collapse of this system and to blame it on another country or group. And this is why they've been pushing so hard. Now, you have to remember, if none of these countries, if they don't do anything and they continually provoke and nothing happens, the central bankers, the U.S. government, will do it on their own. They will create the event and, of course, blame it on another country. Just like the MH17 that went down. As soon as it happened, they knew exactly who it was without any evidence, without looking at any evidence, without even showing any satellite or any other data of evidence. They just knew exactly who it was. And you know right from that point that this whole thing was a setup. And what we're seeing right now is that jobs here in the United States, well, they've completely changed over the 25 years. The country from 1990 to 2013 has completely changed. We were mostly manufacturing back in 1990. Many of the states were manufacturing, a lot of them retail trade, very few were in healthcare department where a lot of people got jobs in healthcare. And this was the majority of the country. Today in 2013, most of the country, I would say about almost 92% right now, most of the people have jobs in healthcare and the service sector of the country. The only manufacturing states that are left are Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Alabama, and that's pretty much it right now. The rest have to do with healthcare and maybe 2 or 3 states that have to do with retail trade. So we can see right now that it is completely falling apart we don't produce anything. When I say we, it's the United States government. President Obama was out there saying Russia doesn't produce anything. No, no, no. It's the actually the opposite. Remember, whatever the government officials say, whatever the bankers say, it is always the opposite of what they're talking about. When they say Russia doesn't produce anything, he's really talking about the United States. The United States absolutely does not produce anything. Manufacturing is gone. It's out of here. Yes, we still produce some automobiles and things like that, but for the most part, our manufacturing has declined quite a bit. And I'm looking at these maps here, and I see that back in 1990, we had about 29 states that had manufacturing in them. Today, there's a total of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states that have manufacturing. So we have really lost our edge. We, the United States, does not produce anything anymore. Now what we're seeing is auto sales are starting to falter. The seasonally adjusted annual rate of 16.48 million vehicles sold was down 2.4% from June's revised rate of 16.9 million, which had been the highest since July of 2006. The decline touched all categories: cars, light trucks, domestic and foreign. In dollar terms, sales were even less rosy. The Motor Vehicle Company of the Retail Sales Report by the Commerce Department already showed a drop of 0.3% for June. When unit sales were still rising, now that unit sales have begun to taper as well. Dollar sales are likely to drop even further to drag down overall consumer spending in July. Inventories now are piling up. Remember, they do a lot of channel stuffing into these dealerships, hoping that someone will come by and buy these cars. And what we're seeing is these dealers are in a mad scramble, and the manufacturers are in a mad scramble to get rid of these cars. So what are they doing? They are giving these cars to anyone that has any type of credit. Bad credit doesn't make a difference. You have a heartbeat, you can take these cars. Even if you can't afford to finance it, they will find a way. But what we're looking at right now is the loan-to-value ratios now average over 100% across the industries. Dealers roll everything into the loans because people don't have the down payments. People can't make the payments. So what are they doing? They're rolling everything in there. They're rolling title, taxes, credit, life insurance, and other stuff that's out there. They just put it into the loan. What? You can't afford these payments? No problem. We'll expand the term that you need to pay back the loan. They are doing everything they possibly can to get these people in to purchase these cars because it's starting to falter. It's collapsing. And what we're going to see is this is going to get worse, and especially the subprime people, they can't afford these cars. And the delinquencies are ramping up. And what's going to happen is that this is a huge chunk in consumer spending. If they don't have this, if we took away auto sales, consumer spending would be imploding right now. They depend on this, and this is why this is so important in the GDP. They got to show, yes, people are spending. No, they really aren't. They're taking out loans. They don't have money to spend. They're borrowing this money, and then they're defaulting on this money. So when this starts to go down, we're going to see a very different story, and it's really picking up right now. Now, the student loan issue is getting worse. The Wall Street Journal reports loan application data show clear signs of growing student debt burdens. Through the first half of this year, applicants with student debt carried more than $35,000 in student loans. As most people know, a key metric that mortgage underwriters use to evaluate borrowers' ability to repay a loan is their total to debt income ratio. So what does this tell us? Those people, those students, those youths coming out of college have roughly about $30,000 to $35,000 worth of debt. Now they come out, they're looking for this nice high-paying job, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. They can't find it. It's not out there. So they go and they try to find a part-time job. Well, they find this part-time job. They can't move out on their own, so they stay with their parents. The loans are too much for them, so they have to go to the government and say, listen, can you do something with this? And of course the government has a program because they realize all these students can't pay back their loan, and they help them out, and they pretty much defer the loans, or they make the payments for a longer period of time. or they lower the payments. So what we're seeing right now is that none of these youths will be able to purchase a home. They can't find the jobs. They can't pay back the student loans. Their debt ratio is way too high because they're not making the income. And what this tells us is the next generation is not there. That's why we see retail collapsing. This is why real estate is going nowhere. This is why we are seeing all of our problems right now. And they're going to continue because the generation after that is going to be worse. And so on. And they realize this. The United States central bankers realize that we are in a crisis. The dollar is imploding. If they don't start a war, all the people will be looking at the central bankers and U.S. government, and everyone will blame them, and they do not want this to happen. Now, like I said, retail is imploding on itself. Office Depot is about to close 165 stores during this year. Now, they're going to close a total of 400 stores, and this is going to go through 2016. But this year, they're closing 165. That's a lot of people that are going to be laid off. That's a lot of people who probably won't be able to get unemployment because they don't meet the qualifications of getting unemployment, so they won't be counted. And we can see right now that more and more stores are closing as time goes forward. We also see that TVA, they're eliminating 2,000 jobs this year. Now, there was a survey done by Wall Street Journal and NBC, and they said that 64% of Americans still feel that they're in some type of recession, that they don't feel like everything is okay. Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because it's not. Yes, when they look at the corporate media and they listen to the president, it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like there's hope. But in reality, everything is falling apart around them. In addition, 71% of those polled believe that the United States is on the wrong track. And this is up from 63% in June. So people are starting to say, okay, I understand what the corporate media is saying. I understand what the president is saying. How come I can't find a job? How come I'm stuck in this low-paying job? How come I had a high-paying job and I did get another job, but it's making $20,000 less? What is the problem here? Something is wrong. And why right now am I feeling this way? Why do I know that my neighbor doesn't have a job? How come when I look at 5 people, I can see that one person is unemployed? Something is wrong, and the people here are starting to wake up. Now, they can't wait. They can't have them wake up too soon here. They need the event first, because if they wake up and they start to realize that we have major problems, that this economy is not recovering, then this whole plan goes down the toilet. Now, it looks like another country decided to join the bilateral trade currency swap agreement with China, and that is Switzerland. The government of Switzerland recently signed a bilateral currency swap agreement with China, enabling the two countries to buy and sell up to 150 billion renminbi, or 21 billion Swiss francs, of each other's currencies. Switzerland is just the latest to join the queue, as nearly 25 other central banks already signed similar agreements with China. This is what it seems like. Every few weeks, we see more and more countries starting to do this. Now, the question is why? Because they realize the dollar is finished. It's collapsing. They're protecting themselves, just like you should be protecting yourselves. You should protect yourselves in a way that you should be buying food. You should be buying water. You should buy medical supplies, weapons to protect yourself. If you have the funds, I would start changing some of my paper currency into gold and silver. This is your insurance policy. This is your hedge against the dollar collapsing, and you should do that. If you can't, then I would focus on those supplies like food, water, medical supplies, toiletries, weapons, things like that, and I would ramp up on that if you haven't started, because when food prices and other products start to skyrocket because the value of the dollar is devaluing, you want to make sure you have a store of food and these type of supplies in-house so you can survive. And especially those people who aren't prepared, guess what they're going to do? They're pretty much going to riot. They're going to raid the supermarkets because they're unprepared, scared, they're worried, they have to protect their family. And you need to make sure that you're protecting your family. Now, it looks like all these sanctions on Russia are really going to hurt the U.S. dollar even more. I mean, the U.S.-led sanctions against Russia may have kind of backfired on the U.S. because it threatens to hasten a move away from the dollar that's been stirring since the global financial crisis. Now, we've seen this with a lot of countries. A lot of countries are setting up these bilateral deals with China to ramp up the reserves of yuan and renminbi and pretty much remove the dollar at this point. And this is happening to more and more countries. More and more countries are joining in. We see the BRIC nations, created their own bank to rival the IMF. They're starting to loan out money to underdeveloped countries, and this is really starting to move forward. We already see Russia, the oligarchs, removing themselves from the Western bank system by dropping Visa and MasterCard, going with the Chinese credit card system. We also see them dumping the dollar and putting their money into the Hong Kong dollar. And they're saying that, it's the same thing because it's pegged to the dollar right now, but if it becomes unpegged to the dollar, they're going to see a 30% increase in value on the Hong Kong dollar. So we can see right now the dollar is weakening. It's collapsing. Countries, business people, corporations all see this happening. And they realize it's going to continue. It's not going to end. And Russia's second largest wireless operator shifted some cash holdings into the city's dollars, the Hong Kong dollars, and they're moving away from the dollar. So we're seeing this happen all over the place. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue. And over the last 13 years, the dollar dominance has shrunk. And what this means is more and more countries are removing it from the reserves and taking on other currencies, and it's dropped quite a bit at this point. Now, it looks like China is pushing their agenda right now, and they are pretty much worried about the U.S. spying on them. So they're getting rid of like IBM, Microsoft. They're not getting Windows. Now they're saying that the government is not going to be purchasing Apple gadgets anymore. They're done with it. China has removed products by American techno giant Apple, including iPads, MacBooks, from the government procurement list amid growing tensions between Beijing and Washington over spying. So they're doing the same thing. Russia's doing the same thing. And all these countries that are worried are saying, you know what? We're not dealing with this. We're going someplace else to get our electronics. And we don't trust the United States at this point. Okay, now with the MH17 plane that was brought down, and of course the United States, without any proof, just blamed it on Russia and the pro-Russian people. There are many different experts out there. There's a German expert out there and other experts out there looking at the wreckage and saying, you know what, this plane was taken down by an air-to-air missile, and it was fired at the MH17, and then it was finished off with a 30-millimeter cannon fire. And the media reports said earlier that the information provided by the black boxes from the Boeing plane, which have not been so far unveiled to the public, said that the aircraft was damaged by multiple fragments of a missile. So this whole Buk missile system seems to be falling apart, and now it's starting to look like the Su-25s that were right behind the plane. Looks like they fired some type of missile, finished it off with cannon fire, and the plane came down. Now, at this point, to me, it doesn't really matter how it was done. We realize that this was a false flag. It had nothing to do with Russia, had nothing to do with the pro-Russian people, and it seems like now it's a complete cover-up by the United States and the central bankers, because what they're trying to do is and the puppet regime of Ukraine, I should say, they are trying to maneuver themselves into this area. And right now, the United States central bankers say that, they have sent an assessment team to the embassy in Kiev to provide support in piecing together the details of the investigation into the downing of the plane. Now, they don't want certain evidence to come out. According to the State Department requests, some 12 logistics and surveying experts arrived in Ukraine capital On Tuesday, the team will assess, advise, and provide recommendations to the U.S. Embassy and their staff about possible U.S. support. Now, they really want to get in there. U.S. is also weighing support to the Netherlands, Australia, Malaysia, and other partners in the recovery work. They want to get in there. They want to make sure that the evidence doesn't come out that it is the puppet regime, that it was part of the United States. And you can see they are really maneuvering. And this is why Kiev has been firing all those shells into the Donetsk area right around the crash site. They didn't want the investigators to reach there until a certain point. And again, we have to remember, the United States central bankers and the Ukrainian puppet regime has never released any real evidence. It's always been Google Maps. It's always been drawn on Google Maps. I mean, every piece of evidence has been debunked. The missile launcher being brought back into Russia. They went by an automobile car dealership billboard, which is in the Ukrainian area, and that was debunked. The recordings, that they had of the pro-Russian people saying they downed a jet, the timestamp was wrong, and then also through spectrum analysis, it looks like that it was pieced together, and we can see right now all this stuff that they're talking about is all propaganda to build up this war. Now, as I said I think it was yesterday in a report, Ukrainian troops defected over to Russia, but Russia right now is sending about 200 Ukrainian army soldiers back into Ukraine, and they're sending them back home. Most of these servicemen understand that they can face penalties in Ukraine for deserting their positions, and yet all of them decided to return home. So they realized that, if they stayed in Russia, it would be pretty bad for their families. It would be pretty bad for them. So they're returning back to Ukraine at this time. Now, it looks like Putin came out with some, I guess you can call them sanctions of his own. Putin is now banning food imports from countries that are sanctioning Russia. Putin orders government to prevent accelerated growth of food prices. Putin limits good imports for 1 year. Putin calls for increase in domestic food supplies. Putin orders government to make a list of restricted agricultural products. Russian government working on list of foods products to restrict. Russia may stop letting NASA use its rockets as a means of delivering cargoes to the International Space Station. And again, the United States uses the Russian rockets to do this, and this would hurt the United States. Now, we also, that I said yesterday, Russia is also looking to close the airspace above Siberia, and it would make European flights, American flights, fly for a longer period of time. It would cost them more money in fuel, and these companies would lose a lot of money. Now, it looks like Russia has signed a 5-year deal with Iran, and this is for energy to consumer goods, which are expected to undermine Western-led sanctions against the two countries. The agreement, which includes closer ties in the oil and gas sector, construction and rebuilding of generating capacity, development of power supply network infrastructure, machinery, consumer goods, and agricultural. It lays the foundation for a multi-billion-dollar oil agreement between Moscow and Tehran, and the so-called oil for goods contract. The oil trade portion of the cooperation deal would be worth about $2.35 billion a year. So they've just signed a deal with Iran. This is not going to help the United States whatsoever. The central bankers are pissed about this. They're also pissed that Russia has made deals with Syria, and they need to get into these two countries. Their goal has been the same. Now, Russia is coming out with the pro-Russian people, and they're saying Russian detectives say that they have proof that phosphorus bombs were used against civilians in the southeast Ukraine. And they picked up soil samples, and they analyzed it, and they're saying, yes, there is evidence, and they have the data that supports it, that they have used banned weapons, and they're bringing them up on criminal charges. Now, of course, we'll see how far this gets, but again, we know for a fact that the bankers, the United States government central bankers, do not care about the people. Once they've taken over a country and they control the puppet government, the people's rights mean absolutely nothing at that point. If they're trying to take over a country and replace the government, then they stick up for the people's rights. So we see that in Syria. Well, the people have a right to remove Assad. Well, the people have the right to, to speak their mind. We saw it in Ukraine. The people have the right to say, you know what, we want to be on the EU system. We don't want to be with Russia. Now, as soon as everything happens and the puppet regime's in there, anyone who stands up and says, you know what, we don't want to be part of the puppet regime, they're all of a sudden called terrorists. So we can see right now the rights of the people in other countries are meaningless to them. And you can take those actions and bring them back here to the United States. How do you think they would react if the rights, the Constitution, if they were able to get rid of that? And you can see they've been trying. They've been trying by sending us to little fenced-in, caged areas to speak freely. They're trying to hit with the Second Amendment. They've been trying to get rid of the Fourth Amendment by searching us without warrants. They've been spying on us, listening to our phone calls, our emails. They don't care about the people's rights. They could care less. Actually, they would love to get rid of it, and they would treat us the same exact way as all those other countries. Now we can see that the United States government and central bankers now are both saying that Russia, they are ready for war. They're ready to invade. NATO has confirmed there's a risk of Russia sending troops into Ukraine under the pretext of a humanitarian or peacekeeping mission. We're not going to guess what's on Russia's mind, but we can see what Russia is doing on the ground, and that is great concern to us. And this is coming from a NATO spokesperson. Then, of course, the United States Secretary of Defense Hagel added, the threat of Russian incursion in Ukraine is a reality. Now, we can see that Russia, yes, they're having drills right now, Monday to Friday. They're about 400 miles inward from the Ukrainian border. Some of the drills move up to that, but not pretty close, but they all go back to that area. And, of course, Russia's out there going, look at the map. We're not even near it. We're pretty darn far away. But of course, it's like clockwork with the U.S. government, NATO. As soon as Russia has a drill, they start the propaganda of Russia is invading. And you can start to see this now. It's continuous. It's nonstop. And before this even happened, I said, as soon as that drill started, I said they're going to come out there and say that Russia is ready to invade. I didn't know they were going to go to this lengths to say, that Russian incursion in Ukraine is a reality. But this is the brainwashing that they're continuing with to convince the American people that Russia will be invading. Sooner or later, they will invade, and they will be our enemies. You have to believe us, please. Well, the Germans, on the other hand, are not buying NATO's perspective. I cannot believe Russia would attack Ukraine, which would worsen the situation further and deepen the conflict with the West, Meister said. I don't see signs for invasion. In fact, Russia has tried to bring in some distance from the separatists, from the pro-Russian people, and that's absolutely right. If Russia truly wanted war with the United States, we can just go back to August of 2013, when the United States, back in that time, had the fleet in the Mediterranean ready to invade Syria. They could have said, you know what? Come on in, United States. We're waiting on the other side. We will support Assad, and we will fight you here and now. They could have done it back then if they really wanted war. But no, they implemented a peace deal. They sat there and they brokered a peace deal. Here, they're saying we have nothing to do with the pro-Russian people. Have the OSCE come in and take a look. Have independent people come in and take a look. We'll let you fly over our borders. You can see this. And guess what? The United States doesn't want to hear this. The central bankers of the United States, they want war. And they need to continually brainwash everyone until you believe that Russia is the enemy, and they're continually doing this nonstop. Now, it looks like Iran is going to unveil their own Iron Dome, just like Israel has. And of course, I've done reports on this that the Iron Dome really doesn't work. Yes, they're spending billions and millions of dollars on it, but it really doesn't really stop much. But the Iranian military leaders announced on Wednesday that Tehran is readying a new mid-range and long-range missile defense system reminiscent of Israel's Iron Dome system. And this consists of missile systems which combine with artillery and radar systems, and they're going to try to hit those missiles down as they come across. Now, it looks like the conflict in Lebanon is escalating here. France now says that it's going to speed up delivery of weapons to the Lebanese army. The tribes are rising up. They're getting nervous. This is turning into Libya, and they're nervous about this. Now, it looks like the Islamic State has seized a dam, the Mosul Dam in Iraq, and it looks like they're going after another dam, and the worry is that the Islamic State could blow it up, and it would pretty much bring down a 15-foot wall of water onto Baghdad. And you have to remember, the Islamic State is created and run by the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations. Actually, the leader is not, his name is, the name he goes by is al-Baghdadi, but his real name is Elliot Shimon. He's a Mossad agent, and this was all created to create chaos within the region. And what's been happening ever since is this group of Islamic, the Islamic State, they have their mission, but the tribes inside Iraq, inside Lebanon, inside Yemen, inside Libya are rising up. The people are looking at this saying, this is our time. We can get rid of the puppet governments and take our countries back. And this is the problem that they're having in Iraq. It's not the Islamic State. It's really the tribes that they didn't count on that are rising up and also fighting against the Iraqi forces. So we have the Islamic State and we have the tribes inside the country, and it's making it harder and harder for this group. Now, the Islamic State is out there, and this could be considered a false flag, and it looks like they're saying that they are going to attack Kuwait to take revenge on the United States. We can get even with the United States. We cannot reach them at this point, but they will come to us after we invade Kuwait. Now, we saw this before, didn't we? Where Iraq invaded Kuwait, and then we had this woman who pretended she was a nurse saying that there's babies in incubators that they're just killing. So if this does go forth and Islamic State decides to go into Kuwait, we can see the United States using this to say, okay, see, they're already moving into Kuwait and into other countries. We need to do something. And again, Congress would have to say, okay, we declare war. And I don't think just because they moved into Kuwait, they're going to declare war. The people are going to say, you know what, let Kuwait defend for themselves. We're standing this one out. And of course, the officials are going to be yelling and screaming, saying, yes, war, yes, war. And when they don't get it, then we'll see some other event to help this along. And we can see how this plan could be worked out here, where they move into Kuwait, test the waters, see what the people are thinking about this, about going in and sending in troops. And of course, the American people most likely will say, no, we didn't want to go into Syria. We're not going to go into Kuwait. You know what? Let Kuwait defend for themselves. They can say, okay, now we need the event, because it looks like no one is being moved by any of this that's going on across the world. Now, Libya, their whole thing is falling right now. The country is in chaos. Libya has disintegrated rapidly in recent weeks. We see that the oil fields are on fire. Everything is collapsing. And we see that Algeria and are getting ready to invade and help with the situation. And the government is pretty much just teetering on non-existence right now. Now, it looks like they're blaming a cybersecurity problem where a Russian gang stole about 1.2 billion internet logins and passwords and more than 500 million email addresses. And of course, they're saying this is a Russian crime ring. It's always going back to Russia, blaming them for this. And they're saying that the hackers they didn't just target U.S. companies; they targeted any website they would get, ranging from Fortune 500 companies to very small websites. And also, they're using this to show that, look, the companies are getting hit, retailers are getting hit. We have CISA now being voted on. We need to exchange personal data. We need to take control of the internet, and we can see they're pushing this agenda right now. Now, we understand Ebola is spreading. Of course, this is what they're telling us. We don't know for sure. And it seems like this is more of a setup. And we're seeing now the people in Sierra Leone, they are saying that, this might be a government conspiracy down there. And a lot of the people there are not staying in the hospitals. They're very worried. They're worried that the government is conspiring to take them away and kill them, and they're actually making up the disease down there worse than it really is. And people are down there saying, you know what? We don't believe you in what you're saying at this point. Now, it seems like in Germany, in Ramstein, Germany, a young African boy slipped into a U.S. cargo plane and landed in Germany. And they found this African boy inside the landing gear. And what's very interesting is Obama now is arriving at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. Now, I don't know what this is right now, but there's signals going off in my head that this does not sound right. Now, of course, we have the fears of Ebola. We have a child from Africa who was put or snuck into this plane, and they found him in Germany, and the president is headed to the same location. And this just setting up red signal flares to me, and we're just going to have to watch that. Now, it looks like the drug, the serum that all of a sudden they had out of nowhere, is coming from, of course, the MAP company, and also from a Kentucky bioprocessing. And they were acquired by Reynolds America. They make tobacco, and also Monsanto is part of this because they create the modified tobacco plants. These are genetically modified. So we can see all these companies have been in on this, and they've been working on this for quite a while. And we can see right now that all of this is starting to look like it was set up, because you need to create a specific variant of the virus to work with the vaccine. And it seems like this is what they're doing, and it looks like they've been doing testing down in Africa, and they wanted this as an outbreak to beef up profits and to scare everyone. And we can see this is moving many different agendas right now. And another piece of evidence, and this is solicitation number HSFE70-14-I-0006. This is coming from FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. What they did back in January, and like I said, they always do this a couple months beforehand, but when we backtrack, we can see that this all starts to fit in, and they knew this was going to happen because they planned it. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is seeking to augment its market research with a request for information to be used in the formulation of the requirement with feedback from waste removal industry vendors that can potentially provide either dumpster services or biomedical waste collection and removal services during emergency response events within the continental United States. And FEMA intends to establish an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract with one or more contractors for a base of 1 year. The vendor must pick up regulated infectious waste daily and replace collected tanks with empty, clean, and disinfected tanks. Now, what in the world would this be for? And it's funny, this was done in January 10th of 2014, and here we are in August, and we have a so-called Ebola breakout. So we can see most of this is set up, and they are pushing certain agendas. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.